The heat was the first thing that made me realize the world was ending. Not the screams, not the gunshots echoing from somewhere beyond the coconut trees. In the Philippines, heat is normal. It wraps around you every day, like an old blanket you never asked for. But that morning, it felt different, heavier, angry. I was living in a small coastal barangay outside of Dumaguete, renting a concrete house with a rusted tin roof and a view of the sea that had convinced me, years earlier, that I was done running from my life. I'd come here chasing cheap rent, quiet mornings, and the lie that I could start over by changing geography. I was wrong about that last part. My name is Evan, and before everything fell apart, my biggest daily concern was whether the power would cut out again while I was working online, or if the neighbor's rooster would start screaming at 3 in the morning like it had a personal vendetta against sleep. That day started normally enough. I woke up sweaty, fan-dead brownout again. The ocean outside was flat and silver, and the smell of fried garlic drifted in from somewhere down the road. Life, stubborn and ordinary. Then my phone started vibrating nonstop. I ignored it at first. Everyone ignores the world until it gets loud enough to force its way in. When I finally picked it up, the screen was filled with missed calls and frantic messages. English, Tagalog, Bisaya panic. Don't go outside. Something wrong at the pier. They're biting people. I laughed. A short, stupid sound. Biting people? It sounded like bad gossip amplified by Facebook and fear. The Philippines thrives on rumors, the way mold thrives on damp walls. Then I heard screaming. Not one voice, many, high-pitched, raw, tearing through the humid air. It came from the road that led toward the market. I stood up, my stomach tightening, and walked to the barred window. People were running. Not jogging, not hurrying, running like something was behind them that didn't care how tired they were. I saw a man trip. He fell hard, palms scraping against the concrete. A woman stopped to help him, and something slammed into her from behind. They both went down. The thing on top of them moved wrong. Jerky, violent. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, and when it came back up, its face was red. That was when my brain finally caught up. I backed away from the window so fast, I knocked over the plastic chair. My heart was trying to break out of my chest, each beat loud enough to drown out thought. I locked the front door even though it was already locked. I bolted the back one too. I stood in the middle of my house, sweating, shaking, listening. The screaming didn't stop. It spread. Gunshots cracked in the distance, rare sounds here, sharp and alien. Dogs barked. Someone pounded on a metal gate, screaming a name over and over until their voice broke. I didn't go outside again that day. By nightfall, the power was gone everywhere. No streetlights, no TV, no phone signal, just darkness, heat, and the distant sounds of people dying. I learned quickly that zombies don't need an introduction. The next 3 days blurred together into a cycle of hiding, listening, and rationing. I had food, rice, canned sardines, noodles, water too, though I didn't trust the tap anymore. The sea was still there, blue and mocking, but stepping outside felt like stepping into a nightmare that would swallow me whole. On the second night, someone tried my door. Soft at first, a knock. "Hello?" a woman called in English. "Please, I'm hurt." My hand hovered over the latch. Every instinct screamed at me to help. That's the thing no one tells you about the end of the world. You don't lose your humanity all at once. It peels off in layers, and the first one hurts the most. I didn't open the door. The knocking turned into pounding, then scratching, then wet, choking sounds that ended in silence. I slid down against the wall and cried without making a sound. My teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. That was the moment I understood. Survival here wouldn't be heroic. It would be ugly, quiet, lonely. On the fourth day, my supplies became a problem. Rice lasts, but water doesn't. The heat drains you even when you don't move. I had maybe 2 days left before dehydration made the choice for me. Staying inside was no longer an option. I waited until early morning, when the sun was just starting to stain the sky pink. I wrapped a towel around my neck, stuffed a backpack with empty containers, and grabbed the closest thing I had to a weapon, a machete I'd bought months earlier for clearing weeds and never actually used. The door creaked when I opened it. Every sound felt like a scream. The barangay looked wrong. Doors open, motorbikes abandoned in the road. A jeepney half crashed into a coconut tree, its windshield smeared dark. Flies buzzed everywhere, fat and fearless. I moved slowly, every step deliberate. Near the sari-sari store, I saw them up close for the first time. They were people once. Filipinos, expats, tourists maybe. Their skin had that grayish, bloated look that comes fast in this heat. Eyes dull, movements clumsy, but relentless. One of them wore a school uniform, the white shirt torn and soaked through. I retched behind a wall and forced myself not to freeze. I filled my containers at a neighbor's deep well, hands shaking so badly I spilled half of it. On the way back, something spotted me. It let out a wet moan and started toward me faster than I expected. Panic ripped through me, pure and electric. I swung the machete without thinking. The blade bit into its shoulder. Not enough. It grabbed my arm. The smell hit me, then rot and salt and blood baked by the sun. I screamed and hacked again, harder this time, until it fell and didn't move again. I stood there, gasping, my arms slick with something that wasn't mine. I had crossed a line. There was no going back. That night, as I cleaned the machete and watched the sun bleed into the sea, I realized something else. The Philippines wasn't going to save me. The islands were traps, beautiful, isolated traps. No easy escape, no quick help, just heat, water, and the dead. If I was going to survive, I couldn't just hide. I would have to adapt to the climate, to the people who were left, and to what I was becoming. By the fifth day, the silence had become worse than the noise. At first, the screams and gunshots had terrified me. Now, their absence felt wrong. The barangay lay under a suffocating quiet, broken only by insects and the distant crash of waves. Even the roosters had stopped crowing, like nature itself had decided to keep its head down. I spent that morning reinforcing the house. I dragged the old wooden table against the front door, hammered nails into window frames, and tied fishing line across the back entrance with empty cans knotted along it. It wasn't clever, but it was something. Every survival instinct I'd ever ignored in favor of comfort was suddenly screaming for attention. I checked my arm again. The thing had grabbed me hard enough to bruise, but the skin wasn't broken. I washed it for the third time anyway, scrubbing until it burned. Infection was a death sentence here, even before the dead started walking. By noon, the heat had turned the house into an oven. Sweat pooled at my lower back. The air was thick with the smell of rust, old food, and fear. I couldn't stay inside much longer. If I was going to live, I needed more than water and rice. I needed information. I waited until late afternoon and headed inland, away from the coast. The road climbed gently, flanked by banana trees and small concrete homes. Some were empty. Others were locked tight. A few had dark stains on the steps that I refused to look at too closely. I heard voices before I saw them. Low, tense, human. I froze behind a tricycle parked on its side, my grip tightening on the machete. Two men stood in the shade of a mango tree ahead, both holding bolos, not shambling, alive. Relief hit me so hard it nearly knocked me over. Then one of them laughed, sharp and humorless. "Told you not to waste bullets," he said in Bisaya. They were standing over a body. Not dead, not yet. The man on the ground was bleeding from the leg, his hands up in a weak, pleading gesture. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I didn't need to. I'd seen that posture before, long before the world ended. The second man nudged the injured one with his foot. "He'll turn anyway," he said. "Better now." I backed away slowly, heart pounding. The idea that living people were already doing this to each other terrified me more than the zombies ever had. A branch snapped under my foot. Both of them spun toward me. "Hoy!" one shouted. Adrenaline flooded my legs, turning fear into fuel. I didn't look back. I cut through a side path, ducked through a fence, and kept going until my lungs burned and my vision tunneled. When I finally stopped, I was deep in the trees, crouched behind a fallen trunk, trying not to throw up. That was lesson number 2 of the apocalypse. Survivors don't automatically mean allies. I didn't head straight home. Instead, I followed the slope upward until the trees thinned and the land opened into a small cluster of houses built around a concrete chapel. The gate was barricaded with bamboo poles and scrap metal. A hand-painted sign hung crookedly on the front. "Buhay pa kami." We are still alive. A woman spotted me first. She raised a shotgun and didn't lower it. "Stop there," she said in accented English. "Hands where I can see them." I froze, palms up, machete hanging loosely from my fingers. "I'm alone," I said. "I just want to talk." Voices murmured behind the gate. After a long moment, an older man stepped forward. His hair was white, his face carved deep with lines that spoke of decades in the sun. "You bitten?" he asked. "No." "You sure?" I rolled up my sleeve and showed them the bruise. No broken skin, no fever. The woman studied me for a long time, then lowered the gun slightly. They let me in. There were 9 of them total: fishermen, farmers, one school teacher, a teenage boy who hadn't stopped shaking since I arrived. They had food root crops mostly, and rain barrels for water. They'd lost 3 people already. "We don't go out unless we have to," the old man said. "And we don't trust easy." I nodded, smart. They offered me boiled camote and a place on the chapel floor for the night. I ate slowly, trying not to cry from the simple relief of not being alone. Human voices filled the space, cautious but real. For the first time since it started, I slept without my machete in my hand. That peace lasted exactly 1 night. The attack came just before dawn. The dead found us. Maybe they followed a scent. Maybe noise carried. Maybe the world just hated small comforts. It didn't matter. The first scream snapped me awake. The barricade shook under the weight of bodies. Hands pushed through gaps, fingers snapping as bamboo bent. The teenage boy froze, staring, useless with fear. "Move!" someone shouted. I grabbed my machete and ran for the gate. Zombies pressed against it, faces smashed flat, teeth gnashing. One slipped through a widening gap and stumbled forward. Someone fired the shotgun. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. A body dropped, but more took its place. "Fall back!" the old man yelled. We retreated into the chapel as the gate finally gave way. Wood snapped, metal screeched, the dead poured in like a tide. I felt something inside me harden. Fear was still there, but it no longer ruled me. I shoved a pew over, blocking the aisle. The woman with the shotgun reloaded with shaking hands. The teacher pulled the teenage boy behind the altar, whispering fiercely. We fought. Sweat, blood, screams. At some point, the dead stopped coming. The sun rose higher, lighting the carnage in cruel detail. 3 of us were injured. 1 had been bitten. We didn't argue about it. The old man sat with him as the fever rose, holding his hand until the end. When it was done, we buried him behind the chapel under the mango tree. No speeches, no prayers, just quiet. By noon, we all knew the truth. This place wasn't safe anymore. The woman, her name was Lara, looked at me as we packed what we could. You came from the coast, she said. Is there anywhere safer? I thought of my house, the sea, the isolation. Maybe, I said, but nothing stays safe forever. We left before the sun climbed too high. In the Philippines, the heat doesn't just exhaust you, it makes decisions for you. It tells you when to stop, when to drink, when to lie down, and give up. Traveling during midday would have killed us faster than the dead ever could. There were 6 of us now. Lara, the old man, Mang Arturo, the school teacher, Rizal, 2 fishermen, Joel and Paeng, and me. No one said the names of the others who didn't make it. Saying them felt like dragging their ghosts along behind us. We moved in a loose line along back roads, avoiding the main highway. From a distance, the asphalt shimmered with heat, and wreckage burned vehicles, abandoned buses, bodies left where they fell. The dead clustered there in thick, dangerous groups, drawn by the early chaos. Out here, it was quieter. The countryside was alive with smells, wet soil, crushed leaves, smoke drifting from somewhere unseen. It felt wrong that nature could still be beautiful when everything else was rotting. By mid-morning, Paeng collapsed. He went down hard, his knees folding like paper. Joel skidded to a stop beside him, panic sharp in his voice. We all dropped our packs. Lara handed over the last bottle without hesitation. Paeng drank greedily, then vomited it back up onto the dirt. His skin was pale, eyes glassy. Heat stroke. Rizal swore under his breath. He needs shade, rest. Mang Arturo shook his head. Rest is death. No one argued, but no one moved either. Paeng looked up at us, ashamed and afraid. Go, he said hoarsely. I'll slow you. The words hit harder than any scream. This was the moment every survivor's story pretends doesn't exist. The part where someone knows they are already dead and has to convince the living to accept it. Joel refused. He lifted Paeng's arm over his shoulder and hauled him up. We walk slower, he said. That's all. And we did, for a while. The road narrowed into a dirt track lined with sugarcane. The stalks towered over us, rustling in the breeze. Every sound made my heart jump. Every shadow looked like movement. That's when the moans started. Low, multiple, coming from ahead. I raised a fist, signaling a stop. The others froze instantly. Fear had sharpened us. Through the cane, I saw them, a group of maybe 10, wandering aimlessly, clothes torn and faces ruined. We could go around. But Paeng stumbled again, crying out in pain. The sound carried. Heads snapped up, bodies turned. The dead began pushing through the cane toward us, snapping stalks as they came. Move, Lara hissed. We ran. Joel half-dragged Paeng, desperation etched into his toggle. The path opened onto a small clearing and a concrete waiting shed, the kind used for buses that never came anymore. I slammed into it, breath ragged. "Inside?" I yelled. We piled in just as the first zombie burst from the cane. I swung the machete, the blade biting deep. Another came. Then another. There were too many. The fishermen fought like men used to blood and knives. Efficient and brutal. Lara fired once, twice, each shot echoing like a dinner bell. Rizal screamed when one grabbed his arm, and Mang Arturo crushed its skull with a rock like he'd done it 100 times before. Paeng couldn't keep up. A hand caught his leg. He fell. Joel turned back without hesitation. "Joel, no!" Lara shouted. Too late. The dead swarmed them. Joel's scream cut off suddenly, like a wire snapping. Paeng's eyes met mine for one terrible second before teeth sank into his neck. We ran. There is no dignity in survival, no honor, just motion. We didn't stop until the coast reappeared, blue and endless and cruelly peaceful. My house still stood. The others stared at it like a miracle. Concrete walls, bars on the windows, a clear line of sight in every direction. "This is good," Lara said, awe slipping through her exhaustion. We barricaded immediately. Furniture, nails, fishing line. The routine already familiar. When it was done, we collapsed on the floor, silent. That night, Joel and Paeng haunted my dreams. In the morning, Mang Arturo didn't wake up. His breathing had slowed during the night, then simply stopped. No wounds, no fever. Just age and exhaustion finally collecting their debt. We buried him by the sea. Rizal said a prayer. Lara stood watch. I stared at the horizon, wondering how many more names the ocean would swallow before this was over. Days passed. We settled into a rhythm, fishing at dawn, scavenging nearby houses cautiously, rainwater collection, quiet meals, no unnecessary noise. For the first time, we weren't just reacting, we were planning. But safety makes you complacent. On the 9th day, a boat appeared, offshore. A small banca, drifting, its motor silent. A man waved frantically. "Help!" he shouted. "Please!" Lara raised her gun. Could be a trap. Rizal hesitated. Or he's alone. The man's voice cracked. "I'm not infected. I swear." I looked at the sea, at the endless blue that had once promised escape and now delivered only strangers and risk. Every lesson I'd learned screamed at me to stay quiet. But the memory of that woman at my door, the one I didn't help, rose up and wrapped around my throat. "Bring him in," I said. Lara stared at me. "You sure?" "No," but I nodded anyway. The man's name was Marco. He was Filipino, late 30s, lean in the way hunger carves people down. His hand shook as he drank water, spilling half of it down his chin before he could slow himself. No bite marks, no fever. Just fear, raw and constant. He told us his story in pieces. The outbreak had hit his town across the water. He'd watched his wife turn in front of him. His son had been taken by neighbors trying to flee. Marco escaped on the banca with nothing but a knife and a fuel tank that ran dry long before he reached us. "I didn't know if anyone was alive anymore," he said, voice breaking. "I thought I was calling to ghosts." Lara watched him the entire time. We quarantined him in the back room for 2 days. No one argued, not even Marco. He sat on the floor, staring at the walls, like they might bite him. When he finally emerged, he was quieter, smaller somehow. Trust didn't come back all at once. It never does. Life settled into a fragile routine again. Marco proved useful. He knew engines, knew how to fix nets, knew which fish were safe when the water started turning strange. He laughed sometimes, and when he did, it felt like a small rebellion against the world. But good things attract attention. On the 12th night, the dogs started barking. Distant ones, panicked and furious. I woke instantly, heart hammering. Lara was already on her feet, gun in hand. Lights flickered in the distance. Not fire, flashlights. Human. "Get down," Lara whispered. We killed the lantern and watched through the bars. 4 men moved along the beach, armed. One of them carried a radio crackling softly, with static and distant voices. Rizal swallowed. "They're not scavengers." "No, they were organized." Marco went pale. "They took my boat," he whispered. "A group like this, they said they were securing resources." Lara's jaw tightened. "Pirates." They moved with purpose, checking houses, marking doors. One of them laughed as he kicked in a window down the shore. A scream followed, short. I felt something cold settle into my gut. "They'll find us," Rizal said. "It's only a matter of time." We argued in hushed voices. Running was what had killed Joel and Paeng. "We fortify," Lara said finally. "And if they come, we make it costly." No one slept. At dawn, they came. 2 approached the house. 1 stayed back with a rifle, watching. The leader knocked, polite as a salesman. "Open up," he called. "We just want to talk." No one moved. "We know you're in there," he continued. "You got lights, nets, fresh fish. You can share or we can take." Lara raised the shotgun, eyes hard. "Go away." The man laughed. "That's not how this works anymore." The first shot shattered the window. Glass exploded inward. Marco screamed. Rizal dragged him down. I swung the machete as a hand reached through the bars, severing fingers in a spray of blood. The air filled with smoke and shouting. They rushed us. It was chaos, gunfire, screams, the sickening sound of bullets tearing through wood and flesh. Lara fired point blank, dropping 1 man. Another stumbled into the fishing line trap, cans clattering, buying us seconds that felt like gold. I tackled one of them, driving him into the wall. He was strong, desperate, very alive. We struggled, slipping on blood. I slammed the machete into his leg, then his neck, until he stopped moving. The last one ran. Silence crashed down around us, heavy and ringing. We'd won, but winning felt hollow. Rizal was bleeding from the shoulder. Lara had taken a graze to the thigh. The house was damaged, and now we'd been seen. Marco stared at the bodies, shaking. "They'll come back," he said, "with more." He was right. That night, as we patched wounds and burned what we could, the ocean reflected distant fires along the coast, signals, warnings, or celebrations. I stood watch until dawn, the weight of every decision pressing down on me. This place was no longer a refuge. It was a target. We left at first light, smoke still hanging over the shoreline like a bad memory. We took only what we could carry: rice, dried fish, water containers, ammo we barely knew how to count. I locked the house out of habit, even though I knew it meant nothing now. The plan was simple, which meant it was probably stupid. Head inland toward the hills, avoid the main roads, reach the old hydro station near the river, rumored to be clear, defended by people who hadn't lost their minds yet. Rumors were dangerous currency, but they were all we had left. Rizal walked stiffly, his shoulder bound tight. Lara moved like a predator, every sense stretched thin. Marco stayed close to me, quiet, eyes always scanning. None of us mentioned the coast again. The jungle swallowed us fast. Humidity wrapped around us like wet cloth. Every breath tasted green and heavy. Leeches clung to our boots. Insects screamed constantly, an endless, buzzing reminder that the world was still alive, even if we were barely keeping up. We crossed small villages emptied by panic, doors left open, cooking pots still on stoves, food burned to charcoal. I tried not to imagine the last moments of the people who'd lived there. By the second day, water became an issue. Streams were everywhere, but trusting them felt like gambling with loaded dice. We boiled what we could, rationed harder, spoke less. Dehydration makes everyone mean. Fear makes it worse. That afternoon, we heard singing. A woman's voice, soft and steady, floating through the trees. We stopped instantly. "That's impossible," Rizal whispered. The voice wasn't panicked. It wasn't frantic. It sounded normal. Lara raised a hand. "We go around." Marco shook his head. "Or it's people, real people." I stared into the jungle, the sound tugging at something fragile in my chest. Music had been one of the first things to die when the world ended. "We listen," I said, "from a distance." We crept closer. The clearing opened to a small farm. Sweet potatoes, banana trees, a makeshift fence, chickens clucked lazily, and in the center, a woman stirred a pot over a fire, humming. She saw us and didn't scream. "About time," she said. "You look like hell." Her name was Anika. She lived with 4 others, 2 elderly sisters, a young couple, and a baby who slept through the apocalypse like it was none of her business. They'd blocked the access paths, kept fires low, killed quietly when they had to. "We don't take everyone," Anika said bluntly, "and we don't keep people who can't pull their weight." Lara respected that. We stayed the night. For the first time in weeks, I ate fresh food, real food. I almost forgot to stay alert. That night, Marco sat beside me while the others slept. "I won't slow you down," he said suddenly. I turned to him. "If it comes to it," he continued, voice tight, "if I become a problem, don't hesitate." The firelight flickered across his face, hollowing his eyes. "I let my family die because I hesitated," he said. "I won't be the reason it happens again." I didn't answer. Because leadership doesn't come with speeches, it comes with silences you don't know how to fill. At dawn, the dead came. Not a herd, a wave. They poured from the tree line, dozens of them, drawn by smoke, sound, or just the cruel logic of coincidence. Anika shouted orders instantly. People moved, guns fired, knives flashed. It wasn't enough. The fence fell fast. The elderly sisters couldn't run. The young father tripped, carrying the baby. Screams tore through the clearing. We fought our way out. I lost sight of Rizal in the chaos. When I found him, he was on the ground, pinned, teeth snapping inches from his throat. I drove my blade down, again and again, until the thing stopped moving. Rizal coughed, eyes wild. "Go!" He pushed me away and turned, dragging a zombie with him as more closed in. I didn't argue. I ran. By the time the jungle swallowed us again, we were 4. Me, Lara, Marco, Anika. We didn't stop until our legs gave out. Anika stared back the way we'd come, jaw clenched so hard I thought it might break. "This land," she said quietly, "it doesn't forgive mistakes." That night, rain fell hard and cold. We huddled beneath a rock overhang, soaked and shaking. I realized then that every place we touched burned behind us. Not because we were cursed, But because survival demanded movement, and movement left bodies in its wake, the hydro station lay ahead. So did whatever final shape this nightmare was going to take. We smelled the hydro station before we saw it. Oil, smoke, human waste, the sharp, metallic tang of machinery that hadn't been allowed to rest even after the world ended. It sat in a valley carved by the river, concrete walls rising out of the jungle like a relic from a more optimistic time. Lights glowed behind the fence. Real lights. Annika stopped walking. That's trouble. Lara disagreed. That's power. And power means control. Marco said nothing, but his shoulders tightened. We approached openly. No ambushes, no sneaking. Anyone running a place like this would see us long before we crossed the clearing anyway. 2 guards met us at the outer fence, rifles steady, eyes cold. "Drop weapons," one said. Lara hesitated just long enough to make the point, then complied. I followed, Marco and Annika after. Being armed only matters if you're allowed to use it. Inside, the station buzzed with activity. Roughly 30 people lived there. Engineers, families, fighters. Solar panels supplemented the hydro turbines. Crops grew in terraced beds along the riverbank. It was the most organized thing I'd seen since the world collapsed. And at the center of it all stood Captain Reyes. He was former military, that much was obvious. Posture straight, voice calm, eyes that never stopped calculating. "You're lucky," he said after hearing our story. "We don't usually take in strangers." "What do you want in return?" Laura asked. Reyes smiled thinly. "Everyone pays." The price became clear quickly. Labor, loyalty, and silence. They ran patrols along the valley, clearing the dead. They raided nearby settlements, sometimes rescuing, sometimes not. Supplies flowed one way, orders flowed down. Disobedience was punished quietly. That night, Annika confronted me. "This is a cage," she whispered. "A clean one, but still a cage." "She's right," Marco added. "They don't plan to rebuild. They plan to rule." Lara listened, arms crossed. Rule beats dying. I didn't sleep. Over the next week, the truth sharpened. We saw prisoners forced to work the turbines, saw a man executed for stealing food, saw a woman turned away at the gate because she couldn't offer anything useful. Reyes called it necessity. I called it the beginning of something worse than zombies. The breaking point came on a supply run. We reached a small riverside village. Smoke still rose from cooking fires. People were alive there. Families. Reyes gave the order. "Take what we need. Leave nothing that draws the dead." That meant burning it. When the villagers resisted, his men opened fire. I froze. Lara didn't. She shot one of Reyes's men in the leg when he raised his rifle at a child. Everything exploded after that. Gunfire, screams, chaos. The dead drawn by noise poured in from the trees. In the confusion, Marco grabbed my arm. "Now," he said, "this is the only chance." We ran. Annika covered our retreat with brutal efficiency. Lara fought like she had nothing left to lose. We crossed the river under fire, water churning red around our legs. Marco didn't make it. A shot took him in the back. He fell face first into the water, eyes wide, shock frozen there forever. I tried to reach him. Lara dragged me away. "He knew," she said. "He chose this." We escaped into the hills, with the dead closing behind us and the hydro station burning in the distance, whether from our sabotage or Reyes's retaliation. I never knew. By dawn, there were only 3 of us left. Exhausted, hunted, free. I thought of Marco's words by the fire. Don't hesitate. I finally understood what he'd meant. Power always demands something in return. And I was done paying with other people's lives. We didn't stop running until the jungle thinned into rock and scrub. The hills rose sharp and unforgiving, cutting the wind just enough to make the heat manageable, but offering nowhere to hide. Below us, smoke marked the valley, black fingers clawing at the sky. Whether Reyes had burned the station to deny it to the dead or lost control entirely didn't matter. The hydro station was gone. So was any illusion that organized power would save us. Anika collapsed first. Not dramatically. Just sat down hard on a rock and refused to move. That's it, she said. If I take another step, I die. Lara scanned the ridgeline, rifle ready. If we stop, we die anyway. I looked back toward the valley, then forward toward the mountains. For the first time since this started, I didn't see a path, only outcomes. We rest, I said. 10 minutes. Lara looked at me like she might argue. Then she nodded. 10 minutes turned into 15, then 20. That's when we heard it. Not moaning, not screams. Drumming. Low, rhythmic, human. They came over the ridge in formation, dozens of them. Survivors, armed with spears, bolos, salvaged rifles. Their clothes were layered with armor made from tire rubber, plastic, scrap metal. Faces painted with ash and blood. Behind them, farther back, the dead followed. Hundreds. They weren't running from the zombies. They were driving them. The realization chilled me more than any bite ever could. These people, Lara murmured, they figured it out. A man stepped forward, older, scarred, eyes sharp with intelligence and something worse, certainty. You came from the river, he said. You burned the machine. We didn't, I started. He raised a hand. Doesn't matter. The dead will finish it. He looked at us with curiosity, not hostility. You can join us, or you can feed them. Anika spat at his feet. You're monsters. He smiled. So are they. At least we choose what we are. The dead pressed closer, herded by noise and fire. A living tide guided by human hands. Lara raised her rifle. I put a hand on it. Don't, I said quietly. She stared at me. You'd kneel to them? No, I said. I'd lead them somewhere else. Understanding flickered across Anika's face. They want the dead, she said. They need them. I nodded. Then let's give them more than they can handle. We ran. Straight toward the coast. The drummers shouted. Orders barked. The dead surged after us, pulled by sound, movement, hunger. The living followed, too excited now, eager for sport. The sea came into view as the sun began to set, painting everything red. My house, what remained of it, stood on the edge of the barangay like a final marker in my life. Beyond it, the ocean stretched endless and indifferent. I kicked open the door. Inside! Lara shouted. We moved fast, too fast for fear. I ripped open fuel containers I'd hidden long ago, poured gasoline along the floor, the walls, out the windows. Anika understood instantly. You're insane. Always was, I said. The first zombies hit the yard as the living closed in behind them. Lara fired, each shot precise. Anika used fire. Molotovs improvised from bottles and cloth. Flames leapt, turning bodies into screaming torches. I stood in the doorway, lighter in hand, heart pounding. This house had been my escape, my hiding place. Now, it would be my weapon. The dead flooded inside. I lit the flame. Fire roared through the house, heat slamming into me like a physical blow. I dove out the back as the structure ignited, tin roof screaming as it warped. The living panicked. The dead burned. The sea wind carried smoke and fire straight into the horde, confusion tearing through their formation. Zombies broke free, turning on their handlers. Screams replaced orders. We ran again along the shoreline toward the cliffs. Laura was laughing, wild, free. Anika slipped once, nearly fell. I grabbed her arm and hauled her up. "Why are you helping me?" she gasped. "You don't even know me." I thought of Marco, Rizal, Joel, Paeng, Mang Arturo. I'm tired of leaving people behind. We reached the cliffs just as night fell. Below us, the dead and the living tore into each other in fire and darkness. No control, no leaders, just chaos. The drumming stopped. The screams faded. By morning, the beach was silent. We survived. But survival didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing on the edge of something unfinished. The Philippines was still burning, islands isolated, groups rising and falling, the dead everywhere. But for the first time, I didn't feel trapped. I felt ready. The morning after the fire, the world felt hollowed out. Smoke drifted low over the beach, thin and gray, like the land itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. The tide came in, washing blood and ash back into the sea without ceremony. The dead lay tangled with the living, burned shapes that no longer belonged to either side. No drums, no screams, just waves. We didn't talk much as the sun climbed. Lara cleaned her rifle in silence. Anika sat on a rock, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the water. I walked the shoreline, counting bodies without meaning to, stopping when the numbers blurred. The people who had driven the dead were gone. Whether they were eaten, burned, or scattered didn't matter. Their control had been an illusion. Fire and hunger always outlast strategy. By noon, the smell forced us to move. We headed north along the coast, toward cliffs and coves the dead couldn't easily reach. The land narrowed there, rocky and sharp, waves crashing hard enough to drown out anything chasing us. If the Philippines was a trap, then this was at least a corner with teeth. We found the lighthouse on the second day. It sat on a rise overlooking the sea, concrete, thick, and weather-beaten. Stairs spiraling upward inside like a coiled spine. The door was locked, but not barricaded. No signs of struggle, no bodies. Empty, but intact. We cleared it carefully, room by room. A few walkers trapped on the lower level went down easily, bones brittle, movements slow. The upper floors were clean, dry, safe. For the first time since this began, we didn't have to leave. That night, we lit the beacon. Not constantly, just brief flashes after sunset. A signal, not a promise. Something that said we're still here without screaming it to the dead. Anika cried when the light first cut across the water. "I didn't think I'd ever see something like that again," she said. Weeks passed. We learned the rhythms of the place. The dead washed up sometimes, drawn by the shore, but the rocks broke their legs and the tide took care of the rest. Fishing was good. Rainwater collected cleanly. The lighthouse gave us height, sight, and time. 3 things survival feeds on. Others found us. Not many, and not all at once. A woman and her brother, half-starved but smart. A former nurse who knew how to clean wounds without losing patience. Two fishermen from a farther island who'd learned the hard way that boats were safer than roads. We didn't take everyone. That hurt, but it didn't break us. We watched for bites. We watched for cruelty. We watched for the hunger that turns people into reyes. And when someone didn't fit, we turned them away before desperation made the decision uglier. Lara became our shield. She trained us, drilled us, made us move like people who intended to stay alive. She never talked about her past, but sometimes I'd catch her staring inland, jaw clenched, like she was daring the world to try again. Anika became our heart. She remembered names, stories, birthdays that no longer meant anything, but still mattered. She planted what little soil we could haul up the cliffs, stubborn green life pushing through rock because she refused to accept that beauty was optional. And me? I became something I never planned to be. A voice people listened to. Not because I was strongest or smartest, but because I remembered what it felt like to open a door and choose not to. Because I carried the weight of that choice and let it shape me instead of hollow me out. The dead never stopped coming. They never will. But they came slower here, one by one, in drifts instead of waves. Hunger without direction. One evening, months after the fire, Lara stood beside me at the top of the lighthouse. "You think this lasts?" she asked. I watched the sun sink into the sea, red and endless. "No," she smirked. Below us, people moved cooking, repairing nets, laughing softly despite everything. The light flashed once, sweeping the horizon. The Philippines was still broken, still burning in places we couldn't reach. Islands, isolated, monsters, wearing both rotting faces and living ones. But here, on this strip of rock and concrete and stubborn human will, we had carved out something real. Not a return to the old world. Something smaller, harder, honest. I don't know how this ends. Maybe the dead rot away. Maybe they don't. Maybe one day, the sea carries something worse to our shore. But I know this. I didn't survive by hiding. I didn't survive by ruling. I survived by choosing over and over again not to let the world decide who I was going to be.